Esebua has been competing for what I can see a fairly long time. I've got records here that go all the way back to 2003 when World Championships were in New York. She was 42nd there, but for her to come here and place in the top 4 is definitely a big accomplishment for her.
The two athletes approaching the starting line. Shooting on target number 2, it's Fang Yuting from China. She defeated a Korean archer in the quarterfinals 6-5 and qualified 3rd overall. And you see her stats there from this week here in Torino. Her opponent, as you mentioned, target number 2, Kristine Esebua from Georgia, defeated also a Korean archer, Young Jasami from Korea, 6-4 in the quarters, and both of these athletes definitely took the hard way to get here, but and went through some very tough opponents. But nonetheless, they are here, semifinal number 2, looking to punch their ticket to the gold medal final a little bit later on this afternoon.
It's very interesting that both of these archers are definitely Korean killers. China is a very strong archery powerhouse. They have the 2008 Women's Olympic champion, and here we see them again at the World Championships 3 years later, still vying for a gold spot. With Team Georgia, it looks like they might have a Korean coach standing in the box, and a lot of countries are going to a Korean coach just to learn the Korean method, but right. I believe that it's a lot of hard work, dedication, and practice that will make you a better shooter.
No, absolutely. You can have any kind of coach in any kind of sport, but if you don't have the commitment, the work ethic, and of course the overall talent to start off with that sort of base, it really won't make a difference where your coach is from. But nonetheless, it's as you mentioned, you've seen a lot of these archers hire former Korean archer stars to manage their program, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Definitely this sport is a lot of mental preparation required just to shoot all of these really good arrows. The physical aspect of these archers is obviously still pretty high, but the mental aspect is going to be about 90% versus a 10% physical. You see Miss Esebua starting with a 9 and a 7, giving her 16 points. Miss Fang has an 8 and a 9, giving her 17 points, and so far the lead. She can clinch this match with a 10 on this next arrow.
10 will take the set.
And that is a 5.
Unbelievable there, Crispin. What happened? Something went wrong.
Something did go wrong. She's looking at her coach like she doesn't know what's going on. From what I can see on the field, a little bit of wind is picking up. And that's a 7 for Kristine Esebua. That's the wrong camera, but that's okay. The main important thing is that Miss Esebua is in the lead by 2 to Miss Fang's 0. And what I was trying to say before is that when she was looking at her coach kind of confused, it is possible that a little bit of a gust of wind picked up. You can see the trees in the background moving, and they're gusting, right? They're not at a constant wind speed. And with this very humid air, that can affect an arrow a lot more than, say, a dry, thin air. So a smaller wind can push the arrow potentially out to the 5, like what we saw with Miss Fang. But I've never seen Miss Fang on the international competition, especially in the semifinals.
Yeah.
So she could be experiencing a little bit of pressure.
Of nerves as well, right?
Exactly.
But you know what? You talk about the scenario of wind as we see some of the replays of the earlier matchup, earlier end, I should say. Where we're located is within some of the most historical buildings in downtown Torino. Now, some of the pathways that are leading to it shoot out at different angles. We also have an opening near the starting line behind the archers. Now, because of we're almost in a boxed in, there's potential of swirling winds as well.
That is definitely true.
So it's hard to, as you can see, the layout of the actual field. It's hard to tell exactly where the wind could be going.
Exactly. The archer can feel the wind going, let's say, from right to left, but down by the target, it's actually going left to right. So being in this little confined space and getting a swirling wind is definitely really confusing for the archer. As you can see, Miss Fang has got a straight line across the middle of the target with all of her arrows. There's no up and down variation, which just does point to wind. What I also forgot to mention, because we do have wind, there's an 8 from Miss Esebua off to the left, which is where Miss Fang is shooting as well, so I'm pretty sure there's a wind that they're not feeling right now. Each archer only has 20 seconds to shoot their arrow, so they can't exactly wait for the wind to stop. That's a good shot for Miss Fang, still on that little horizontal plane that I was talking about. They cannot wait for the wind to stop. They can't let their arrow down and look at the flags or anything. They just have to power through and make that shot.
No, that's exactly it. You see other sports where athletes will step aside until a wind or some sort of maybe rain or some other element passes through, but that's not the case here with archery, and it's something that they play on, so to speak, throughout.
Archers, we will shoot through rain, we will shoot through hail. We can't shoot through a thunderstorm or a tornado, obviously, but we will shoot through all conditions. That's a very quick shot. That's a 10. She takes the set.
Fantastic
28
shooting.
to 27, 4-0 for the archer from Georgia.
And we could see yet another quick semifinal, which of course would be another surprise, considering that these athletes are very evenly matched and obviously took a long time to get here. So a clean sweep isn't something we expected, but it's definitely on the line in semifinal number 2 here.
Yes. Now what had happened to Miss Fang, she had met Han Yong-hee, from Korea, and they had tied in their set in the quarterfinals and had to go to a tie-breaking arrow. What would happen in this case is if each archer ties at 5 set points after 5 sets, they will go to 1 arrow shoot-off. And Miss Fang had shot a 9 where Miss Han shot a 7. In this case, you shoot 1 arrow after the 5 sets. You shoot 1 arrow, and it's whoever's arrow is closest to the center. That's a big pressure situation.
Talk about a cooker there as far as everything on the line with 1 shot. Well, there it is there with the tiebreaker, and hopefully we see some more of that this afternoon, because it is kind of interesting as far as the fans' perspective, but from an archer's perspective, I'm guessing it's probably the opposite.
It can be the opposite. It can be actually a little bit better depending on if you shoot first or second. That's a 10. She didn't think it was going to be a 10 with how she looked after that shot, but it was a very lucky shot and a very good shot from her otherwise, giving her a 10. Miss Esebua has to obviously shoot a 10 just to keep this set tied. That's an 8. Off to the right, she might have compensated for that wind we were talking about before, and the wind might have stopped on that arrow, giving her the 8 outright.
It's funny how sometimes facial expressions will almost tell you what sort of shot the athlete just made without even looking at the target, and we saw evidence of it with that first shot.
Yes, sure. That's a very quick shot again. That's another 8. Miss Esebua kind of opening up. She might have felt a little too comfortable with the 4-0 lead in set points over Miss Fang, whereas Miss Fang is trying to keep her stuff alive.
8 or better will take this set.
That's a 9. Miss Fang has clinched this set with a 28. Miss Esebua could shoot a 10, but that'll still only give her 26, still giving Miss Fang 2 set points.
Now in this situation, Crispin, with her up being 28-16 and impossible to lose, why is the 3rd arrow shot?
The 3rd arrow is shot just as a regulation arrow, but also the archer can technically decline to shoot that arrow if they don't want to. However, most archers will try to figure out what was going on. Can I make another good shot? This is kind of like a reconfirmation of I am a good archer. I can shoot in the 10 ring.
Makes total sense.
Or find out what the heck the wind is doing. You can see those trees moving behind her, and it doesn't really look like the coach. You can see the coach's shirt on Georgia is flapping just a little bit, but it's not flapping as much as the trees. So you can see the difference in the wind, between what the archers are feeling and what's going on around the stadium. You see the flags in the middle of the screen flapping.
And it's interesting because the flags right across from us are moving. The trees in the background behind the archers are moving. But if you look at this windsock, it's just picked up going a little bit right to left, but nonetheless, wind is starting to play a factor here, and that wasn't the case in this morning's draw.
Mm-hmm. And nonetheless, it is a swirling wind coming out of these little alleyways of these little wind tunnels that are created between the buildings, so the archers can potentially feel a little bit more wind than that is present, or the opposite. It's a 4-2 lead for Miss Esebua from Georgia, and since Miss Fang has the deficit in set points, she'll be shooting first. A little bit of an awkward shot, but still a 9. Miss Esebua lining up her shot. Generally shooting a little quicker than I've seen archers shoot. That's very quick, but she still makes it work. It's a 9. They are tied in this set so far.
Is that just personal preference on how an archer will approach the line and release? Because you mentioned that she is shooting quite fast. as far as the time is concerned, where others may even hold on to it for a good 12 to 14 seconds.
That's correct. Well, with these recurve bows, what happens is there's a little piece of metal that goes over your arrow, and it's called a clicker. And once your arrow point passes that little piece of metal, it'll click against your bow, and that will tell you when it's good to fire. What this does is make sure that you bend the limbs and draw your arrow back the same amount each time. You can see your clicker at the right-hand side of the screen. Once that clicks, the arrow is gone. But she's holding for a really long time, and what's supposed to happen is the arrow is not supposed to stop moving. Once the archer has drawn the string back to their face, it looks like they've stopped, but the arrow is still moving. What happens with Miss Esebua is her clicker is set out a little bit further from where Miss Fang's is relative to where they are, and it looks like Miss Esebua has just won this match.
Fantastic performance there with a 9 on her last shot. She ends up taking this end 26-25, I believe. But more importantly, as you mentioned, we'll advance to the gold medal matchup a little bit later on this afternoon.
And that is a gold medal matchup that I would not have banked on. Definitely Georgia versus Chile. And I bet Katuna Naramanditsi, from Georgia, who was eliminated by Miss Lemoine, so she'll be definitely cheering for her teammate to take out the woman who took her out of the competition.
Absolutely. It looks like Van Lemoine will have to tackle both Georgia archers if she's going to claim gold medal here at the 2011 World Archery Championships.
And it looks like China and France for the bronze medal coming up later on this afternoon. But definitely great shooting from Kristine Esebua from Georgia to take the berth into the gold medal match.
Well, our sets and sights are set for the gold medal matchup and also the bronze medal matchup in the women's individual recurve discipline. And you heard it there, exactly who will go head-to-head. Now it's up to the men, and it's an interesting scenario here where we talked about the women with Korea not being prominent. Well, it's the exact opposite, Crispin, with the men being